Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Menachot daf Mem Zayin. We are going to begin on the top of Mem Zayin Amud Aleph Tana Rabbana. So let's begin. So the Gemara says as follows: the Kivsiat Seres, which we've been discussing, the sheep in which were brought on Shavuos, there are two of them, and it was together with the lechem, the shtei halechem. So ein mekanchin es lechem el b'shchita. So as we said, we in our Mishnah a couple of days ago, if you have one, which one is primary, and therefore which one is ma'akev the other one. But if at the time of the shchita you had already had the shtei lechem, so then we say that each one will hold the other one back. In other words, let's say after you did the shchita of the kivsiat seres, you lost either the kvasim or you lost the lechem, so then it's considered like the whole thing was lost. And we had a niboya if that's also by tenufa, but by shchita we said for sure. Now, ketzad shachtan lishman. Let's say you did the shchita properly with a right intention, and v'zark daman lishman, and you also did the zrikas adam with the right intention that you were doing it for the sake of the kivsiat seres. So in that case, kaddish halechem. So the bread becomes sanctified, and therefore it's allowed to be eaten, and that's it. And it's basically because of that. If you would lose them, then it could be ma'akiv each other. But the focus here is it's mutar b'achil, as Rashi points out. Let's say shachtan shlosh shman v'zark daman shlosh shman lo kaddish halechem. So let's say that the shchita was not done with shma, was done for a different carbon, and also the zrika. Both avodos had an improper intention. So we say lo kaddish halechem, as Rashi says, lo tafis pidyoina b'kedusha shtei halechem el b'kedusha shar kedusha salishka. So as Rashi explains, it only takes upon itself, just like any kedusha of anything in the lishka, but it doesn't take upon itself like the kedusha saguf of like a carbon, the shtei halechem. And then Rashi quotes the Toras Kohanim and says that we can learn, as it says, mikarbonoi al zevach taida, when it comes to the carbon taida, which also has breads, has 40 breads. Magid, we learn she'im nizbach shlo l'shem taida. Let's say you shechted the carbon taida without that reasoning. Lo kaidish lachmai. We say also by the taida that the breads do not become sanctified. B'kivsiat seres mikachi lechem mitaidav el nazir gamrinan, and we ordered out from the el nazir among all the other karbanos that the nazir brings. We ordered out from there. Okay. So if everything was done wrong, then you can't eat the bread. If everything was done right, then you can. Now, what if we split it? Let's say shachtan lishman, zarek dam shloshman. So let's say you did the shchita, and you did the shchita with the right intention. However, when it came to the zrika, it was shlo lishman. So what happens now to the bread? On one hand, you did one of the avodos properly, the shchita. However, during the time of the zrika, you had a different machshava. So din is halechem kaddish and a kaddish divrei Rabbi. We'll have to understand what exactly does that mean. It's holy but not holy. It's like it's half pregnant, half holy. What does that mean? So we're going to get into that. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon, Omer Oil Minu Kaddish, Ad Sheyishchait Lishman, V'Yizrak Daman Lishman. It has to be everything. So it's not half Kaddish, it's not Kaddish Minu Kaddish, it's not Kaddish at all. Okay. So my time with the Rabbi. So what is this logic of Rabbi? Why does he say it's Kaddish Minu Kaddish? Because the pasuk in the Midbar says like this: Ves ha'ayil yasa zavach shlomim Hashem. That regarding the ayil, that the ayil is a carbon, and it should be a shlomim to Hashem. And then when it's brought properly, then altsal hamatzos, it'll be linked to the breads. Fine. So what do we see? That it's the zvicha of the ayil is mekadesh the breads, and therefore we can learn out just like we saw with regard to the ayil. So too when it comes to the kivsiat seres, it's doing the shchita properly is what's mekadesh the breads. Well, remember the shchita mekacha. So therefore we see that even the shechita alone will take upon itself at least some element of kedusha. So to say there's no kedusha, no, you can't do that, because we see that at the time of the shechita, if it was done properly Shema, so then it should be kaddish. But again, since they did the zrika shlom Shema, so we'll say it's also eno kaddish. For Rabbi Eliezer Rav Shimon, according to Rabbi Eliezer Rav Shimon, it says no, it's not kaddish, doesn't matter. Yaseh, you should do it properly. What does that mean? Ad shiyaseh kol asiyaisa. You have to do everything. It means that even if you did the shechita right, you have to continue to do the zrika also lishma. Rabbi Nami Haksiv Yasu. So according to Rabbi, you can have a kasha. We see clearly that everything, including the zrika, should have to be lishma in order to matter the breads. No, iksiv zevach yaseh. If it mentions zevach and then yaseh, which means even though you did the shechita properly, which is the zevach, still you have to continue to do the rest properly, then kidikamer, then I would agree to you. However, hashtaksiv yaseh zevach, it says yaseh before. So b'ma yaseh, so what should be done properly? B'zvicha. As long as the zvicha is done, then it takes upon itself at least the element of some element of kaddish. Rabbi Eliezer Rav Shimon haksiv zevach. Right, so what does he do? It seems that it's all totally on the zvicha. So therefore, why would he say that it's not kadosh at all? So hahuma boilel could Rabbi Yochanan. The Rabbi Yochanan hakol moedim. Everyone agrees. Shesarch she'el lechem b'shash shchita. As we said, in order for it to take upon itself the kedusha, the bread has to have been around at the time of the shchita. As Rashi says, Afil Rabbi Eliezer, the Eimer zrika ikar, even though he says not they have to do everything lishma, including the zrika, and the zrika is actually the ikar. Nonetheless, even though the zrika to him is the most important thing, the bread still has to be around at the time of the shechita. V'lo havi b'shash shechita. Now let's say the bread's not around at that time. Well, mekachli zrika. The zrika won't do anything either. So therefore, it is true that there's an important time of the time of the shechita. That just means that it has to be that the breads are there. And if the breads are there, b'shash shechita, then the zrika will help. But if the zrika was done shul shema, then it's not going to be good. Okay, so that's the way he learns out. So my kaddish made a kaddish. Well, okay, fine. I understand that you're saying it's kaddish based on this pasuk. So what does it mean eno kaddish? Okay, fine. The zrika is shul shema, but what does it mean kaddish made a kaddish? So Abaye oimer. So Abaye will tell me that what does it mean? It means kaddish ve'enu gamor. It is kaddish, we just didn't complete the process, right? And the Gemara is going to explain what that means also. Rabbi Omer kaddish ve'enu nitar. It means that it is kaddish, the breads. However, because the zrika wasn't done properly, so the breads are not mutter for the kohanim to eat. Now, my binayu. So what's the difference? Look at Rashi. Kloimer kivan di'amr Abaye enu gamor, that you're not done. So kol shekain de enu nitar. So clearly it's not mutter. Deha mimais trumas alishka bo. Zrika's down will have lishma, right? And the zrika wasn't done properly. So to a mater b'achila. Enu gamor di'amr Abaye l'ma hilchasa. So the question is, what's the real nafkamina if at the end of the day it's kadosh, enu kadosh? The reality is that you can't eat it anyway. So what is the real nafkamina over here between these two shitas? So now let's look at question 8. Kisli atzer sheshachlan shman v'zarkan dam shlosh shman halechem kadosh enu kadosh divrei Rabbi. Rabbi Shimon Omer lolam enu kadosh. So what's the nafkamina between the two? You can't eat them either way. So my benayu, so ik benayu is lemitvas pidyainai. When it comes to being able to redeem the breads onto money. Now this is, we're going to see a lengthy Rashi what that means. But look, at least let's read the answer. Let's read the way the Gemara says it. Abaye will tafas pidyainai. According to Abaye, he'll say that it's not the pidyon is not typhus. It's nothing. Rava tafas pidyainai. According to Rava, he'll say that it is typhus. Okay, now Bishlomo Rava Hainu Dika Ben Rabbi Eliezer Reb Shimon Ben Rabbi Eliezer Reb Shimon. Galabai my Ika Ben Rabbi Eliezer Reb Shimon. So Ika Benayu, which is the second answer, with Suli B'Yotzei, to passel if it was taken out. Okay, so we're gonna have to spend a few moments looking at these Rashis. So, first of all, L'Suli B'Yotzei. So what does that mean? So Rabbi Yarmer Kadosh Ksas B'Shchita, it became a little bit Kadosh at the time of Shchita. So Im Yatza, if let's say you took it out, Nifsel, then it becomes Puzzle. Shafil Zarkul Shma. Even if you would have done the Zrika Lishma, the fact is you took it out after the Shchita, Nami Aser B'Achil, you still won't be able to eat it. However, according to Rabbi Eliezer, the Yarmer Shchita Lo Mekadsha, that the shchita really isn't the main thing, it's only the zrika. So the fact that you took it out after the shchita, ein nifsel b'yaitze, the enu kadosh im yatsu ben shchita l'zrika. So between that, it's not an issue. V'im achar kach zarch l'shmo kosher. If you had done the zrika afterwards and it was already brought back in, then it's fine. Okay. But then this Rashi says shibush gomerhu. This is unbelievable. It's like a huge mistake. The kol shekain lo Rava. So according to Rava, kivan de kedushason shchita kedushas aguf gemura lo nafik su l'chulin. He says, I understand if he holds that its mamish obtains the level of kedushas aguf, then certainly you should not be able to redeem it. Well, we'll see the lefikach in a second. Well, Rabbi Yer Mishnei Devarim Hamatirin Ma'alim Zeblo Zeh. So let's look at this Rashi. Lefikach Nira LeRabbi Dehachi Garsinan the Lashon Hagoinhu Labaya Tafas B'Yainai. According to Bayit, actually it is Typhus. Rabbi Lo Tafas B'Yainai. Why? Well, Bayit Yer Edu Gomor, because he says you didn't complete it. Adayin Luchol of Kedushas Gemura. So since it's not complete, it means that this Tishtei Lechem have not taken upon itself the sanctity called Kedushas Aguf, like a carbon. And therefore, V'yakati Shach B'Pidyon. And therefore, you could redeem it. However, Rava, skipping a line, Diyamar Kaddish Gomer, it's Kaddish Gomer, so Kedushas Aguf was Shach B'Pidyon. Obviously, it's not Shach B'Pidyon. So that's one answer. And you skip down, again, what is the Psuli B'Yaitse? So Rashi says, L'Rebbe mifsul b'yaitze, he'll passel it if you took it outside. Im yatze, if you took the shtei lechem outside, between the shchita and the zrika, that'll passel it. Well, yekasher lishchet l'kvasim acherim, and you wouldn't be able to take even shecht other kvasim with these breads. Rabbi Eliezer mifsul b'yaitze. Why? Shel yardel la kedushas aguf, kedushas damim, because the breads have not taken upon itself Kedushas Haguf yet, because the Shchita is not the Iker. And therefore, because of that, the Ein Yaitz is possible. So if you took it out, it's not a problem. Therefore, V'kshen Lishkatala Kvasim Acher. So now let's look at the answer for question 8, which also happens to be TA26 and TB29. So let's see how he answers it. Right? If you're able to remove the sanctity of the breads to chulin. And again, really, this girsa of Rashi seems to make sense. It's all totally, if it's Kedushas HaGuf, then no. If it hasn't obtained the level of Kedushas HaGuf, then you could. And for that same reason, Labai Ikabinayu Liv Suli B'Yaitze was taken out, right? So if it was taken out after the Shechita, but if you hold the Zrika as the Iker, so you can bring it back in, and then it wouldn't be an issue. Okay, let's look at question TA26. Let's see if they wrote it any differently. All they wrote, they didn't even explain it. It's just O Lamatvis Pidyoino, O Lifsuli B'Yaitse. Okay. And what did I write? Im Niftu Yatzul Chulin, Im Posel B'Yaitse. Okay, that's what I wrote. Okay. Sounds pretty good. All right, let's move on. Fine. So Bamine Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak Rav Chia Barabba. So he asked the following kasha. Kivsei Atzeres. Again, when we're talking about on Shavuos, these kvasim. Now Sheshachnu Lishman, as we said before, you shechted it properly. However, Zartam Shlo Lishman. right? So again, we had this machlokus. What exactly is the status of the bread? Is it kadosh or eno kadosh, or is it? Do we say it's not kadosh at all? Okay. So oisa halechem mahu bachila. So what is the din? Can you eat it? So I thought we already said it just a few moments ago that you can't eat it. So it's like this. Eliba, who are you talking about? Eliba, the Rebbe Lezer, Reb Shimon. Now Rebbe Lezer, Reb Shimon, as we said above, holds that it's not kadosh until you shechted it lishma and you did the zrika lishma, and there was no zrika lishma, right? Ha'omer zrika the mekadsha. He holds that it is the zrika that's mekadosh. It says Rashi, v'haya fil kadosh lo havi kosh kein das b'achila. Right? It's not kadosh, and obviously you're asking, could you eat it? Of course you can't eat it, right? It's nothing because you did the zrika shlo lishma. So according to him, obviously you can't eat it. So that you can't say it's the question should be about him. Okay. So if it's not kadosh, then certainly you can't eat. You can't eat it. Okay. Can't eat the lechem. So iyaliba the Rabbi. So how about according to Rabbi? Now Rabbi said that it's kadosh ve'enu kadosh. Now, what did we say? It's kadosh ve'enu kadosh. Still, even though there was two interpretations, as we saw, bein l'Abai, bein l'Rava, kadosh ve'enu niterhu, right? Still, maybe it's kadosh because of the shechita, but nonetheless, since the zrika is shlo l'shma, you can't eat it. So, what are you asking this kasha? Can you eat it? Of course not. El aliba the haitana. Actually, I'll show you perhaps. This Tana will hold that it could be in this case. The Tanya Avua the Rabbi Yomi Barabba Shtei Lechem. So you have the Shtei Lechem Shiyotzim Ben Shchita L'Zrika. So what happened? It left between Shchita and the Zrika. So he said again, is it going to be that it has like the status of Kedushas Aguf and therefore becomes problematic? So what happened? The Zarek Daman Shel Kvasim Chutz L'Zmanon. Now, what ended up happening here is he didn't just bring it in, and the shechita again was done, let's say properly, but the zrika wasn't that it was shlo shema, but rather it was chutz l'zmana, that you had a machshava, a pigel, that I'm going to eat these breads outside of their designated time, which of course we know if you would end up eating it would be typically an isser of Yibichai Karis. So Rabbi Lezer Omer ein belechem mishum pigel. So there's no, in this case, there's no pigel, and it's because of the general rule that we've said numerous times that the only time something can become pigel is if there's nothing else wrong with it. But these shtei lechem, because it was biyaitse, so therefore it already took upon itself, let's say kedushas aguf, and therefore it's already possible. So now the reality is, if one would eat it, they're not going to be chayiv for pigel, because you only chayiv pigel when every other aspect of the avoda was proper. Rabbi Kiva Omer yesh belechem mishum pigel. Yeah, Rabbi Kiva says there is. Okay, so this is the machlokas, because why would there be pigel? Okay, apparently because it's, even though there was something wrong, it's okay. Maybe because it didn't take upon itself kedushas aguf. Amar Sheshes Hani Tanoi is Karebi Srilahu. These Tanoi must be like the Shita Rebbe. That what did he say? Yamrin and Shchita Mekacha. That it's not the Shrika, but it's the Shchita which is Mekadish, and not the Zrika. Mihu Rabbi Eliezer l'Taimei. Rabbi Eliezer, who mentions this statement that the lechem there's no din pigel, is because what does he say? The Omer ein Zrika mo'elos l'yaitze. What does that mean? So Rashi says Hilkach lo kavate l'lechem ha'pigel. This bread which was taken out can't be pigel. The kvar pasulhu, since it left the designated area, it was already pasul, and therefore in pigel b'makom psul, as we saw in the beginning of this Masechta, as well as elsewhere in Zvachim, that the only time there's that pigel could actually be chal on an item, that there could be an iser kares by, again, it was chutz l'zmanai, and then you eat it chutz l'zmanai, is only in a situation where everything else was fine. But over here, since it was biyaitse, so therefore it's, even though you had a machshos pigel, that's not going to do anything. In zrika mo'elos l'yaitze. So he holds, as Rashi says, the posel machmas davar acher that this is a situation where it became puzzle, but an unrelated thing to the pigel, and therefore he still holds that there would be that it would actually be a din of a pigel. That's why again Rabbi Akiva says yesh belechem yishum pigel, even though you had a machshava shel shema, but the other thing that you did was yaitse, you brought it out in the wrong place, so there could still be pigel on that. Did not. As we continue to Mem Zayin Mebez, so the Gemara says like this: Imori Kadshim Kalim. When it comes to Kadashim Kalim, for example, like a Shlomim, so the din is, as Rabbi Yossi Glili, we hold like Rabbi Yossi Glili, typically, that Mammon Balamhin. Kadshim Kalim, like a Toida, Shlomim, Bechor, these Karban Pesach, they belong to the owner. It's considered to be Mammon Balim, says Rashi, Ein Behen Me'ilah, and therefore there cannot be Me'ilah, Ella Be'imurim, only when it comes to the sacrificial parts. As it says, Kochel Hashem, Uramas Imuri Kadshim Kalim L'Me'ilah. When it comes to the Imorim, the sacrificial parts of the Kadashim Kalim, which are put on the Mizbech, so there could be Me'ilah on the Imorim. But that's it. So let's understand now. The Imuri Kadashim Kalim, so you have these Imurim of Kadashim Kalim in which there is potential of Me'ilah on them. Shiatz Lefnei Zrikas Damim. And let's say it left the proper place, but it was done before the Zrika. So Belezer Aimer Ein Mu'alin Behen. There's no din Me'ilah on these Imurin, because the only time, as Rashi says, Hach Zrika Lavara Isam Lachali Kavoa, Din Zrika Mo'elos Hayaitse, Upigel Nami Leisbahu, fine. So Ve'ein Chayav L'Lein Mishum Pigel, and we see there's no din of Pigel, but Naisa V'Tameh, which is basically what he said before, because since there was already a problem, so therefore there's not going to be a din Pigel either. On it. Rabbi Akiva Omer Mu'alin Behen, when it comes to the Mori Kadashim Kalim that left before Zrikas Damim, there is a din Me'ilah. Now, according to that opinion, is the question, as we said, if the Shechita was Lishma, and the Zrika was Shlo Lishma, so what is the din according to this opinion? Whether you can eat it. What is the din? Mid Zrikas Pigol, from the fact that you sprinkled it, and you had this machshava of Shlo Bizmanoi, that it should be done not at the right time, so Kaval Lechem Bepigol, B'Yaitse Kibasar. So do we say that the bread takes upon itself Pigol, B'Yaitser Kiyaitse Kibasar, just like the bread? Now, even though the bread never left, right, but the lechem did leave. So we say that the bread is like the carbon itself, which is a big chiddush, because you would think, well, I don't understand, because but we said it's because it's b'davar acher, it's a separate thing. The whole time we say that pigel will not work is when we're talking about the same item. But over here, you're having a machshavas pigel on the animal, doing the zrika of the dam of the animal regarding something else of the shtei alechem, of the breads. So in that situation, maybe there is pigel. So maybe based on this, we should say the same thing. That if a person has a pigel machshava, but we're talking about the bread left, so maybe we should say, we say that maybe the bread still takes upon itself the status of the meat itself. It's kabasar, which didn't leave. So the question is, since we see over here the bread is like the carbon itself, so Zrika Shalashma Nami, if you did the Zrika Shalashma Nami, Shari Leila Lechem, maybe you could be able to eat the bread, right? Odilma Luchumra Minan Lukul Amrinan. Maybe we're only going to say this to go strict, like in the case above, but to go kula, says Rashi, Lios Lechem Nechol, in order to be able to eat the bread, Lo Amrinan, Leinin Zrika She'eno Huygenes. Okay. To say the bread is like the carbon, that you could eat the bread, just like you eat the kvasim. So that's what we're saying. So according to them, do we say that this would work, or is it only l'chumra but not l'kula? Therefore, you can't eat it. Masvar papa umamai dechi isnehu avroi pligi. How do you know that we're talking about a situation where it's avroi, that it's on the outside? Dilma bid isnehu avroi dekol yamlo pligi de in zrika mo'elas l'yaitze. Maybe if the other parts were outside, then everyone holds that the zrika will not do anything regarding yaitze. However, ubahadar elinhu pligi. The whole machlokis is when you brought it back in. Rabbi Lezer Savar law Karabi Diamar Shchita Makacha, that since the Shchita is what's Makadish it, so Ivsulhu B'yaitze. So now that you brought it out afterwards, now the bread has Kedushas Aguf, and therefore it's apostle. Rabbi Kiva Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Shimon Diamar Shchita Lo Makacha. The Shchita didn't do anything, so this bread that was taken out does not have Kedushas Aguf. So if you take it out and then bring it back in, then V'lo Mislu B'yaitze. It won't possible by taking it out. So maybe that's what we're talking about, okay? So we say Haimai. If he holds like the sheet of Rabbi Svirale, the Amr Shchita Mekachelu, that the Shchita is what is Mekadesh it, the bread, Hainu Dekam Rabbi Kiva, the Kachelu B'Shchita. That's why he said it becomes sanctified with a Shchita. The Isis Rika, Kabbalahu B'Pigel. And then the Zrika could make it piggle. Now, so if it's true that the Shchita doesn't do anything, so Zrika's piggle mi makacha. So then why would we say that the piggle, the Zrika, but was done improperly? Why would that makacha? Zrika's piggle enu mavil edim meila, ve'enu moitzia midi meila. It doesn't bring you to Me'ila, it doesn't take you out of it. Me'ila, what does that mean? It's Be'emuri Kadashim Kalam, regarding the Emurim Kadashim Kalam. And the Einon Moitzim Me'ila Be'basar Kachi Kadashim. So maybe that's what we're talking about. Where it says, Lav is Saisiv, this was not pointed out, this question, Rav Gidel Amarav. Bamini Rav Yirmi Amarav Zera. Kiv Se'at Sarah Sheshakta Lishman. Let's say you have the kvasim, it was shechted lishma, but avad halechem, and you lost the bread. So mahu sheyizrok daman shalo lishman. Could you? Now, what we said before is that if it was lishma, that's it. You lost the bread, you lost the karbanos. That's if you would do it lishma. What if you did the zrika shlo lishma, and therefore all of a sudden the kisi atzeres take upon itself like a shlomim? Now maybe you could eat the meat, which is pretty amazing. We're saying l'shma you wouldn't be able to eat the meat, but shlo l'shma you could. How can that be that something which was done l'shma would not be good, but shlo l'shma would? Like the fact that you have a different intention for a different carbon, then that would be good. Below, what do you mean? We do find this. V'hari Pesach. Now, before Pesach, before Chatzos, a carbon Pesach cannot be brought. It has to be brought after Chatzos on Erev Pesach. Then kashel l'shmoi. Now, if it was brought before and it was brought for the L'Shem Pesach, it would not be good. The kashel l'shol l'shmo, because the shol l'shmo, because it takes upon itself like the din of a shlomim. As we said, that is the typical status of a carbon Pesach. So, if it was done before Chatzos, but it was brought with Shema for a carbon Pesach, it's not good. But Shalol L'Shema, for the sake of a Shlomim, it will be good. So we see that this does apply. No, so what do you mean we don't find this? We find it by a carbon Pesach. No, Hachikah can mean alone. This is the question. Yeshacha Davar. Is there ever a situation, Shinir L'Shmai, that you have the Kvasim that are able to be brought properly and L'Shma, for the sake of the Kisei Atzeres? V'nidcham L'Shmai. But because the bread got lost, so now all of a sudden you can't bring it lishma, ve'enu kasher lishmo, and therefore it wouldn't be kasher if you continue to bring it lishma, but kasher shol lishmo. But now all of a sudden, if you have intentions for it to be like a shlomim, now it will work. Again, v'lo b'hari Pesach achar zmanoi. If let's say it's after the right time, so b'shari mosashan during any other time of the year, it says konu chatzos. it's the same thing, right? If any time during the year, if it was for the sake of a Pesach, it's not good. Shlo l'shma, it is good. So halcha kaminoli. This is the question. Is there something in which we find that initially it is done properly? It's l'shma, like the kivsi atzeres, v'nishchad l'shmo, and you shechted it properly, v'nidcham l'shmo, but then the bread got lost. So now, if you did the zrika l'shmo, then you wouldn't be able to eat it because there was no breads, because the bread is ma'akiv, because as we said yesterday, and again today, that the breads that are there, b'shah shchita, makes everything ma'akiv one to the other. So if the bread gets lost, you can't eat the meat either. The kasher shel l'shmo, but then you could eat the meat. You could eat the meat if you had a different machshava. So where do we see that? We never see it. So going to hello, vari taida she'enu taida, bahari taida. That's all it says is taida. So what does it mean by taida? Look at Rashi. The Amrin b'hai pirka, we said yesterday, mishi shachta, from the time that you did the shchita of the carbon taida. Now the carbon taida also has breads. So when you did the shchita, nifras lachma, the bread crumbled. And if the bread was crumbled, we said that's one of the three issues with the bread, and therefore it becomes problematic. So Adam Yizrok, you can still sprinkle the blood, L'Shem Shlomim. Now, L'Shem Shlomim is Shlo L'Shma, because it's really supposed to be a Taida. But the advice is to do the Zrika Shlo L'Shma, V'Basi Eichel. Then you could eat the Basar. V'Dei Nidrul Yatza, of course, you have to bring another carbon Taida, because it doesn't count as a taida. So what do we see? We see hahacha shenishcha l'shmo. You shechted the taida thinking as a taida, and then v'nidches m'lishmoi v'ksher shel l'shmo. So we say that if you had the intention for it to be a shlomim, then you could eat the meat. So we do find this. So our answer is shani taida. It's different than rachmanik kari shlomim, because the Torah calls it a shlomim. As we saw before, also taida shlomim, it's considered to be a shlomim. And Rashi says, "Ma shlomim karvi b'lo lechem." You don't need bread, so av taida karvi b'lo lechem, right? Umi oilam lo nidcha m'lishmoi. So that's how we say that the taida is not really a raya. So we're going to stop there. Let's look at question 9. Heichem ishkachas ladavar shenir l'shmoi v'nishchat l'shmoi. Did everything properly, but then something got lost. V'nidchem l'shmoi. Therefore, now you shouldn't do it l'shma, but you should do it shlo l'shma. So as we said, we see by the taida, if the breads got crumbled, so you could still do the zrikas adam, but you should have the intention that the zrika should be l'shem shlomim, then you'll be able to eat the meat. Ad kan.